Matt Sager recapping the latest episode of Better Call Saul, JMM, episode 7 of season 5. And I know this is bordering on heresy, but Better Call Saul may now have officially eclipsed, in my eyes, Breaking Bad. It's certainly on the same playing field now. And additionally, we're now seeing a lot of connections between Saul and Walt. Ways in which, for instance, Saul could really sympathize with and see himself in Walt. Better Call Saul, too, after all, is a show about change. And wow, is that change happening fast. And the effects of Saul nay Jimmy's abuse at the hands of Howard, at the hands of his late brother, the excitement he's getting and taking control of his own destiny, even as he's surrendering some of it via his connections to the cartel and his work with them. It is eerily reminiscent of the power that a flailing Walter White seizes in the opening episodes of Breaking Bad as he transforms from Walter White into Heisenberg. Jimmy is really turning into Saul in more than just name. This episode was a big one, start to finish, and the start was pretty substantial. Opening in a courtroom under different circumstances than usual. You might recall that last episode ended on a pretty interesting cliffhanger where Kim is on the verge of leaving Jimmy because of the dramatic betrayal he'd done to her and, well, certainly to Mesa Verde. He'd claimed in a very Walter White manner that what he'd done, his sort of dirty tricks that he pulled against Mesa Verde, that was all in the interest of his love for her. Straight out of the Walter White playbook. I'm doing this for love. I'm doing this for my family. And in the final moments of that episode, she furiously says, through tears, Jimmy, we can't do this anymore. Either we call it off now and remember the good times, or we get married. And sure enough, that's where we open. JMM, the initials that after all were on the briefcase that Kim bought for Saul, Jimmy, in the first episode of season 5, standing for James M. McGill, no longer quite applicable, so he said, fine, it'll stand for my brand new motto, which I'm coining right now, justice matters most. That motto, too, will be put to the test, by the way, before this episode's over. He's got a whole new motto he's got to embrace, but fortunately, the initials still match. But Kim and Jimmy are in court, not to fight, or even to represent a client or prosecute together. Turns out that wedding, it's moving forward. And we learn about Jimmy, Saul, whatever you want to call him now. He's had not one, but 2 marriages dissolved prior to this. So we've still got a lot to learn about this character before season 6 ends next year. But the marriage does happen. The judge is about as dispassionate as you've ever seen. It is the most unemotional wedding ceremony ever. And in fact, Kim and Jimmy are pretty straightforward about it with each other. They sort of negotiate before they go into the courtroom together. That this is about being honest with one another. That Jimmy cannot withhold stuff from her. She can't be compelled to testify against him because that's the entire thing about mob spouses. When you're married, you can't be forced to testify against your partner. A strange way in which to begin this new, one would hope, romantic building of this long-time relationship between the two. Adorably/weirdly enough, their witness is Huel, who offers to go and pickpocket an engagement ring from one of the clerks because there are no rings. Jimmy assures Huel that that's not necessary. There is some kind of love involved here, for sure. First of all, it's Kim trying to salvage the relationship, so bare minimum. Yeah, this is an act of love on her part, and on his part for accepting. But also, for the very first time, particularly in this season of Breaking Bad, we've seen some elements of the domestic relationship between Kim and Jimmy. We've seen them talking before and after work. We've seen them waking up together very unglamorously, with her sort of sleeping way to the side on one end of the bed, him sleeping way over on another with his big gut hanging out. We've seen them brushing together. We've heard a lot of discussions about spitting out toothpaste, and we've seen them do it. All of the less glamorous elements of domestic partnerships. But here, they go home, he does carry her over the threshold, and we see some real romantic, magnetic energy between the two of them. They kiss, they make love. There's a little bit of hesitance on Saul's part, and he sort of starts to tell her the truth, and then he backs away from it, but I'll explain that in a moment. Because after the courtroom scene, in which, although they'll never be law partners, a fact which has devastated Saul or Jimmy or whatever you want to call him today, they are now as close to that as can be. They have, after all, kind of worked a case together this season in a very morally shaky way, the way they sabotaged Mesa Verde, and Kim's going to have to deal with the fallout from that during this episode too. After the civil union takes place, we start to see big changes for everybody. Kim, for her part, has to go down to Mesa Verde with Rich Schweikart. It's a very tense back and forth in which Kevin Wachtel and Paige is more on Kim's side, but Kevin Wachtel is still very hostile and bitter from the events of the last couple of episodes, in which Saul clearly with a little help from Kim behind the scenes, no matter how much protestation they both offer. Certainly Kim, at the very least, as Kevin puts it, dropped the ball, to be sure. But Kim and Rich are not willing to move forward with this relationship being this tense, with them being the lawyers that failed, because they did, after all, try pretty hard. And they come back into the room after a sort of embarrassing browbeating session from Wachtel and Page and explain to Wachtel accurately that he, for his part, ignored his lawyer's advice time and time again. They told him he was in a bind, that Goodman was posing a real threat, and that he could have and should have chosen an alternate call center that would have avoided all the money he had to pay to Goodman, his client, Mr. Acker, and this Native American photographer to whom he now owes all this money from having used a copy of a photo of hers as the Mesa Verde logo for decades without paying her licensing or giving her any sort of acknowledgement. Had he heeded the advice of Schweikart and of Kim, none of this would have happened. He actually accepts this more graciously than you'd think, and things appear to be back to square one for Kim, Schweikart, and Mesa Verde. They seem to be okay. Wachtel is not thrilled, but he's been soothed. He's prepared to continue working with these people. He realizes he doesn't really have a choice at this point. Do I think he's going to be as enthusiastic about meeting with lawyers? Do I think he's going to love Kim as much as he seems to have prior to now? No. But things are fine. So she's back to doing what she wants to do. Granted, she's going to want to take more time to focus on her pro bono clients, and I think Schweikart's only going to be encouraging of that. Saul, however, has a new client today. It's not one he got to choose. He got a visit from his old pal Mike. He wasn't thrilled to hear from Mike. Last time he reached out to Mike, it was in the hopes that he might get a little bit of assistance from the old guy. This was a couple of episodes back when Mike was recuperating on Gus's compound. Saul and Kim were hoping to recruit Mike to get some Oppo research on Kevin Wachtel. Obviously, that time has come and gone. At that point, Mike wanted nothing to do with Saul, told him he was in a tunnel, told him he wasn't interested in working with him, and hung up on him. However, now he's calling. Saul tries to blow him off, give him the same, "Oh, well, you blew me off, I blow you off. Oh, I'm in a tunnel," holding the phone over a blender, making lots of background noises, making it clear that, hey, you screw with me, I screw with you back. That's who Saul Goodman is now. I've taken some of my power back. How do you like that? Then there's a knock on the door. As I've mentioned, Mike is newly invigorated now. Being the right-hand man to Gus Fring has given him strength, peace of mind, and clarity of what it is he needs to do. And in fact, in this episode, we see him reading to Kaylee. He's made things right with her, and he tells Kaylee's mom, his daughter-in-law, Stacy, that he's back with himself, that things are good again. When she asks why and how, he just simply says, "I've accepted the hands I've been dealt." And that is clearly the case. Mike is a new man now. Pretty much everyone is a little bit reborn in this episode. And so the new, mission-oriented, take-no-bullshit Mike is at Saul's door with a job, and he's not going to take no for an answer. He's got a client for Saul, Jorge de Guzman, which, yes, is the secret identity, the fake identity of Lalo Salamanca. Salamanca's in jail, this too because of Mike at the behest of Gus Fring last episode. Fring had found out from Nacho, his double agent slash slave in the Salamanca crime family, that Lalo was planning to chip away at his business. Work at destroying Los Pollos Hermanos, getting his dealers rounded up and arrested through his pipeline to the DEA, the CI to agents Schrader and Gomez, Ocho Loco or Crazy 8, basically making Gus too hot and too little of an earner to still maintain his power and influence in the cartel. Lalo is warring with Gus. Gus, of course, is 2 steps ahead, but Lalo is still a problem. So from behind bars, he's reached out to Nacho, put him back in charge of the cartel, made him his agent on the streets while he's waiting out his trial, and given him the orders which he's relayed to Mike, to torch one of the franchise restaurants of Los Pollos Hermanos. That means Lalo has not been dealt with, that being behind bars has not neutered him or disempowered him. So he wants out on bail, and Mike wants him out on bail. Mike gives Saul everything he needs to make this happen. Basically, all the work he'd done under the auspices of being Dave Clark Private Eye. He explains to Saul, which Saul explains to the judge, that he'd done some witness tampering last episode, which he did. He'd gone in to see this librarian, the sole witness to the murder of the travel wire agent who Lalo did kill toward the end of season 4 of Better Call Saul. And he did influence her. He showed her all these pictures of Lalo's Monte Carlo. He'd encouraged her to remember that that was the car at the scene. Basically had convinced her that Lalo was the guy, the perpetrator of the murder, and had then told her to call the police and tell them that. Now he's got to undo his own work. Fortunately, he's not setting himself up for any kind of trouble because Mike didn't do any of this. It was Dave Clark, PI, a mysterious fake man who can never and will never be found. This is all very uncomfortable for Saul, who meets with Jorge, Lalo, as he knows him already to be, and who he too has told Saul, listen, not going to be a trial, there's not going to be a deal. You're going to make this work for me. Saul is both nervous about the prospects of making this work and legitimately uncomfortable. This is letting a murderer go free. The family now has been in court. He's seen them. It's made him really uncomfortable, as it should. But Lalo points to Jimmy's briefcase and asks him what JMM stands for. Saul explains it's his motto. Justice matters most. Lalo smiles and says, well, look, you want to be a friend of the cartel? It's very simple. Get a new motto. It still fits on your briefcase. Just make money. And the money that he's talking about, well, it's got Saul's imagination piqued. It's ranch in Montana money. It's lavender farm money. He tells all this to Kim right before they make love. This is the scene I was alluding to earlier. He says, there's something I don't think I should tell you, which means I should probably tell you. This is the weird terms of their new marriage. And she goes, okay, hit me. And he says, yeah, I've got this client, possible big money if I'm a friend to the cartel. And she looks at him mystified, because she thinks she knows him, and for the most part she does. She doesn't quite recognize who he's becoming. And she asks in disbelief, you don't want to be a friend to the cartel. And he goes, no. And so sex can happen now. All is well. But that's not really how it works. He doesn't have a choice. That's the thing about being in bed with the cartel. Options? There are no options here. You do what you're told. You therefore make money. Saul does get Lalo out on bail, $7 million. Which he will have to procure. How he does that, that's his task given to him by Lalo. That, yeah, 7 mil, I can do that, but you're going to have to pick it up for me. How Saul's going to do that, we'll find out, presumably next episode. Gus, meanwhile, is dealing with the news from Mike about Lalo's desire to torch one of the franchise restaurants of Los Pollos Hermanos. And this is not just a problem for Gus, but he learns this at a meeting of the various restaurants affiliated with Madrigal Electromotive. And so we get to see another Breaking Bad character pop up in Better Call Saul, Herr Peter Schuler, who we met and saw late in Breaking Bad Season 5, right after sampling a tray of various chicken McNuggets, going upstairs to the bathroom, grabbing an emergency defibrillator, and killing himself in a rather creative and grotesque manner. He's already pretty shaken. This is now, I think, May 2004 that this episode takes place in. Years before that Breaking Bad episode, and he is already a quivering mess. He tells Gus that already the IRS is onto him. They were within moments of catching on to this entire meth scheme. He really wants the lab built so he can have done with all this, begin to make money, and try and distance himself from Gus's criminal empire. Gus drops another very mysterious line on Herr Schuler. So much mystery in Gus's past. After all, he's a man from Chile. We've had it suggested to us many times in the past, going back to early episodes of Breaking Bad, that during his time in Chile, he did some stuff for General Pinochet. And we get another reference to this, in which he grabs Schuler's hands, looks at him, and goes, do you remember Santiago? Our backs against the wall. I will never forget what you did for me. Now, none of us know what the hell that was, but that's really intriguing. Another tantalizing, teasing, and infuriating, because of all the questions it raises, glimpse into Gus's mysterious past. They did some dirty business together in South America, probably at the behest of real-life monster General Pinochet, a guy who committed some gruesome crimes against humanity. And his affiliation with Pinochet explains so much about Gus, who we get to see again this episode. I've heard him described this way, and I wish I could remember who said this, because I'd love to attribute properly. But I've heard him described as man as corporation, and that's so true. Even in just the little activities you see him do in the hotel room as he retires from the meetings at this convention of Madrigal Electromotive restaurants. The incredibly methodical ways in which he unlaces his shoes, removes and hangs up his sport coat. It's unnervingly methodical. And from there, he returns to Albuquerque and with Nacho works quite diligently, while Nacho just randomly, haphazardly spray paints and vandalizes the place. Gus sets up an elaborate, it involves a greased chicken, those deep fryers that Lyle cleaned till his hands were scraped bare a couple of episodes ago, and a couple of other weird Rube Goldberg-esque machinations of timed explosives. So that first Nacho and then Gus can leave, and as the chicken slides down into the grease where the fryers are, both of them can be far enough away from the restaurant that they can see and hear but not be harmed by its horrific explosion. As for Saul, he's torn between a fake family and a real one. Not in his home life, although that's an entirely separate matter, but in the courtroom. To help get Lalo out, he has produced a fake family because the prosecution has said, listen, Lalo Salamanca, Jorge de Guzman, is a flight risk. He's got no ties to the community. Yes, we had some we just learned of witness coercion, perhaps even witness tampering. So yeah, we're going to look into that, but do not let this man out on bail. But Saul has produced a fake family for him, who he's introduced to the judge, and a baffled prosecution team. There's his wife, his 2 kids, his mother-in-law. They love him dearly. Of course, nobody in the courtroom has ever met them before, but Saul has managed to procure them, presumably with some help from Mike. He has to side with them, even as he looks at the family of Ted Whalen, the travel wire agent. Crying, miserable, really seeking, as Mike, in his identity of Dave Clark last episode, as he told the librarian, they're really seeking closure and they're not going to get it. And it's all because of Saul. And he watches them as they all exit the courtroom in this incredible shot. As he peers at them, half of his face obscured behind a marble wall, forming this amazing mirror image of the Saul that we know now and the Saul that he's becoming. It's really poetic, really beautiful, and classic Vince Gilligan cinematography. And then sneak attack from behind. Hey, Jimmy, it's Howard Hamlin again, your old buddy who's been hounding you for, 3 episodes now to come work for me. I'm all about Zen and love and forgiveness, and boy, wouldn't it be great if you came and worked for me at HHM? He asks him again, have you considered the job offer? And Saul, who of course to Howard is still Jimmy, goes, look, I'm not really sure. And Howard goes, yeah, you know what? Don't worry about it. Job offer's off the table. Saul's like, what? That's weird. Howard goes, yeah, you know what's weird? Turns out Howard is not quite the imbecile we took him for. Although what took him this long, we can't really say. But you know what's weird, he says. What's weird is waking up to 3 bowling balls being thrown over your gate, smashing your car. What's weirder still, going to a business lunch with colleagues and being accosted by prostitutes saying, Howie, you can't pay for a tugboat when you went for the full ride. That's pretty weird. And that's when we see Saul's, after first denying, like, Howard, you're talking crazy. Prostitutes, bowling balls, moi? Howard goes, spare me. And Saul goes, you know what? I laughed at your offer. It's beneath me. You're beneath me. And he goes into, well, it's reminiscent of a couple of things. It's reminiscent of, in the very first episode of Better Call Saul, we see him enter the offices of HHM storming in. This was when he was demanding that they pay out his brother, let him free, give him the money he's owed, and stop jerking everybody around. And at that point, he was quoting Network, an over-the-top, insane, grandiose lunatic, as the lead character of Network was. But here he sounds like he's channeling him for real. You're beneath me. You have no idea the circles I travel in, the waters in which I swim. I'm a god and you're a flea. Lightning shoots from my fingertips, you little flea. You're nothing to me. He is out of control with grandiosity. Grandiosity seized from the ashes of a lifetime of being stepped under the heels of people just like, and including, Howard. He's done with that. And as deeply as he may regret what he did today for the cartel, and he does regret it, and as much as he's terrified of the damage he's doing to his life, the poison pill he's already inserted into his marriage with Kim, he's never going to be treated that way again. And he's not going to take this all as losing control to the cartel, of losing his morality. He is going to take this opportunity to say, hey, nobody F's with me anymore. I'm not the joke anymore. Nobody calls me Charlie Hustle. And Howard Hamlin, you're nothing to me. You think you're going to throw me a bone? That's not who I am. I throw you bones if I feel like it. This is something he's been voicing, again, ever since that speech he gave at the commemorative library dedicated to his brother Chuck. The speech that, after all, inspired Howard Hamlin to want to hire him in the first place. So that relationship is effectively over, which Saul wanted. And it's over on the terms he wanted, although he seems a little bit shocked that he lost his cool quite that way. Speaking for the viewers, I was a little bit shocked. And Howard, it's not clear at all what he thinks, but he walks away. It's an amazing way in which to end the episode. And yeah, just 3 episodes left of Season 5 of Better Call Saul. Then next year it's Season 6, assuming health conditions allow for the production to continue without much delay. Here's hoping. And it's only going to get more fast, intense, and consequential from here on out. Certainly next episode I can't wait to see and recap for you. In the meantime, if you'd like to support this podcast, I'd love it if you would. You can go to paypal.me/Matt Sager to make a donation one time, repeatedly, any sum. You can also be a patron at patreon.com/Matt Sager. And I'd love it if you interact with this podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications. If you're on a podcast network, again, you can subscribe, leave reviews and stars. And I'm all over social media. On Twitter, I'm @Matt Sager. On Instagram, I'm Real Matt Sager. You can connect with the show on Facebook at facebook.com/Matt Sager Podcast. I'm a voice actor, and my voiceover page is on Facebook too. It's facebook.com/Matt Sager VO. And for anything else related to me and the show, back episodes of the podcast, stuff I've written, my voiceover reels, and contact info, that and much more is available on my website, mattsagervoiceover.com.